Welcome to another deep dive today. We're going to be looking at some research that you sent me about the Taino people,
All right.
the original inhabitants of the Caribbean before Columbus, right?
Yes.
So we're going to be looking at a 2001 scientific paper that uses their DNA to try and figure out the mystery of where they came from.
It's like a detective story,
Yeah.
but instead of using fingerprints, we're using mitochondrial DNA or mtDNA.
Okay.
And that's passed down directly from mother to child, generation after generation.
Right.
So by analyzing the mtDNA of Taino remains, scientists can kind of trace their ancestry and map their migrations across time.
So it's like a genetic breadcrumb trail
Yeah.
leading us back to their origins.
Exactly.
That's pretty amazing. But before we get too deep into the science, could you give us a little background on the Taino? Why is their history so shrouded in mystery?
Well, so when Columbus arrived, the Taino were the primary inhabitants of the Caribbean islands.
Right.
But their population declined rapidly due to disease and the harsh treatment they endured under colonization.
Yeah.
And this makes studying their history incredibly challenging because so much of their culture and way of life was lost.
Yeah, and this is why this paper is so valuable, right? It's
Yeah.
like a window into a past that we might not otherwise be able to access.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the central question that researchers were trying to answer was, where do they come from?
Right.
And this paper specifically looked at mtDNA from bone samples found at a Taino burial site in the Dominican Republic, hoping to find some answers.
Okay, so we have these ancient bones, and scientists are using their DNA like a time machine to trace the Taino's ancestry.
Right.
How does that actually work?
Yeah. So it all comes down to analyzing patterns in their mtDNA and comparing them to other indigenous populations across the Americas.
Okay.
And you see there are four major Amerindian mtDNA lineages, A, B, C, and D.
Okay.
And they are kind of like distinct genetic branches with unique geographical distributions.
So by looking at which lineages are present in the Taino DNA, we can kind of get clues about their origins and migrations.
Precisely. And so here's where the story takes an unexpected turn.
Okay.
The analysis revealed that the Taino DNA predominantly showed lineages C and D, which are common in South America.
Okay.
But lineages A and B, which are widespread in Central and North America, were completely absent.
So does that mean the Taino might have originated from South America instead of North or Central America?
That's the strongest indication.
Wow.
And it actually aligns with some existing theories based on linguistics and archaeology.
Interesting.
This finding suggests a possible origin in the Orinoco Valley of South America.
Okay, so we're really starting to see a different picture of Taino origins here.
Yeah.
But the study didn't stop there, did it?
No kidding.
It also delved into this concept of a genetic bottleneck.
Right.
What exactly is a genetic bottleneck, and how does it relate to the Taino?
Imagine the Taino ancestors migrating across the Caribbean islands, island hopping their way north.
Okay.
This journey would have been like squeezing through a bottleneck,
Right.
causing a reduction in their genetic diversity.
Oh.
That's essentially what a genetic bottleneck is, a sharp reduction in population size that leads to a loss of genetic variation.
So they are traveling from island to island, and with each jump, the genetic diversity is shrinking.
Yeah, you got it.
I see the visual.
Yeah.
And this study found evidence that the Taino experienced a significant bottleneck.
They did.
Okay.
They discovered that Taino mtDNA diversity was remarkably low compared to other Amerindian populations, likely as a result of this island-hopping migration across the Antilles.
Wow.
And to make sure that they were only looking at Taino genetics, researchers ruled out any contamination from European DNA.
Okay, so we've got these ancient Taino remains. Their DNA is pointing to a South American origin, and they experienced this genetic bottleneck during their journey to the Caribbean. It's like we're starting to piece together this map of their past using only their genes.
That's right.
But the research uncovered even more, right? There was something about shared sequences with modern populations.
You're right. The paper goes even deeper. And it's this part that really sheds light on how interconnected indigenous populations were across the Americas.
Okay.
And we'll explore that intriguing detail in part 2 of our deep dive.
All right. Can't wait. So last time we left off with this really interesting clue about like some Taino DNA sequences being found in modern day South American populations.
Yeah.
It's almost like a genetic echo of the Taino people still like resonating in the Amazon, centuries later.
Right.
What can you tell us about these shared sequences?
Well, it's a fascinating piece of the puzzle, and it highlights how interconnected indigenous populations were across the Americas.
Okay.
So the researchers found these shared sequences in the Yanomami people who live in the Amazon rainforest.
Okay.
And what's even more interesting is that they aren't just random matches.
Okay.
They're positioned in a very specific way on what we call a phylogenetic tree.
Okay. Phylogenetic tree. For those of us who haven't taken a biology class in a while, can you break that down? It sounds kind of intimidating.
Sure, so think of it like a family tree. But instead of people, we're tracing how different DNA lineages branched off and evolved over time.
Okay.
The fact that these shared Taino and Yanomami sequences are found near the root of the C and D lineages suggests that their ancestors diverged very early on.
So it's like their ancestors went their separate ways a long time ago, with one group eventually heading to the Caribbean and becoming the Taino, and the other group remaining in South America and becoming the Yanomami.
That's the picture that is emerging from the data.
Okay.
And it really adds another layer to the story of the Taino people,
Right.
connecting them to the broader indigenous populations of the Americas in a way that we didn't fully understand before.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
But if the Taino and Yanomami diverged so long ago, shouldn't their DNA have changed more over time?
Yeah, that's a great question.
How is it that they still share these specific sequences after centuries of separation?
So that brings up the concept of genetic drift.
Okay.
Over time, random changes can happen within a population's gene pool,
Okay.
especially smaller groups.
Yep.
These changes can lead to certain genetic traits becoming more or less common, simply by chance.
So even though they diverged, they might have retained some of those original genetic markers just by chance.
Right.
That's really interesting how random events can shape evolution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the fact that we can see these shared sequences today,
Right.
it gives us a glimpse into that shared ancestry
Yeah.
and those ancient migrations that might have taken place thousands of years ago.
So we were talking earlier about the genetic bottleneck that the Taino experienced during their migration to the Caribbean.
Right.
If they had such low genetic diversity, wouldn't that have made them more vulnerable to diseases and other environmental pressures?
You would think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Having a diverse gene pool is usually considered beneficial for adapting to changing environments.
Right.
And yet the Taino not only survived,
Right.
but thrived in the diverse ecosystems of the Caribbean islands for centuries. It challenges some of our assumptions about the link between genetic diversity and a population's ability to thrive.
So how do we explain that? Did they develop other strategies to adapt that might have compensated for this limited genetic diversity?
That's a very intriguing question.
Yeah.
And it's where things start to get really complex.
Yep.
It's a reminder that genetics isn't the only factor at play.
Right.
Cultural practices, social structures,
Right.
their knowledge of local resources,
Yeah.
and their ability to adapt their lifestyles to different island environments. All of these factors would have contributed to their resilience.
So you're saying that culture and ingenuity can sometimes outweigh purely genetic factors when it comes to a population's ability to survive and adapt?
Absolutely.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
It suggests we need to look beyond just DNA if we want to fully understand the story of the Taino people.
Absolutely. Their story is a perfect example of the complex interplay between genetics, environment, and cultural adaptation.
Right.
Each element is interwoven, and by studying them together, we can gain a much richer understanding of their past.
That's really incredible.
Yeah.
We've gone from analyzing ancient bones to mapping migration patterns to now questioning the very nature of adaptation itself.
Yeah.
What else did this research reveal about the Taino and their incredible journey? Wow, feels like we've been on this incredible journey.
Yeah.
Tracing the Taino people's path from their origins in South America across the Caribbean, and even finding echoes of their DNA in modern populations.
It's amazing.
It's amazing how much we've been able to uncover from just one scientific paper.
I know.
But I'm sure there's even more to learn, right?
Yeah, there's always more to discover.
Yeah.
And this particular study highlights something that I find truly fascinating.
Okay.
Remember those shared mtDNA sequences between the Taino and the Yanomami?
Yes.
Those sequences weren't just random matches. They were located near the very root of the C and D lineages on the phylogenetic tree.
Right. Yeah, you explained that it meant that their ancestors branched off from each other very early on.
Yes.
I'm still a little fuzzy on why that's so significant.
Okay, so if you picture that phylogenetic tree as like a family tree,
Right.
the further down you go towards the roots, the further back in time you were traveling.
Right.
So those shared sequences being near the root suggest a very ancient connection between the Taino ancestors and other indigenous groups in South America.
Ah, so it's not just that they share a common ancestor, but that this split happened a very, very long time ago.
Exactly.
It pushes the timeline of their divergence even further back.
Yes, exactly. It tells us that the ancestors of the Taino were already distinct from other South American groups,
Okay. Yeah.
even before they embarked on their migration to the Caribbean.
That really reframes their whole story, doesn't it? It's like they were on their own unique path from a very early stage.
Yeah.
But it also raises a new question for me.
Okay.
We've been talking about the Tainos' low genetic diversity due to that bottleneck effect. But if they diverged from other groups so long ago, wouldn't they have had more time to develop their own unique genetic variations?
You bring up a really interesting point. It seems counterintuitive.
Yeah.
You'd expect more time to lead to greater genetic diversity, not less.
Right.
But remember, the bottleneck effect can be a real powerful force in shaping a population's genetic makeup.
So even though they had a long period of separation from other groups, that bottleneck during their migration essentially wiped out a lot of the diversity they might have accumulated.
That's a likely scenario.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a reminder that population history can be a complex mix of divergence, isolation, and even sudden events that dramatically alter genetic diversity.
Wow, it's incredible to think about all the forces that shaped the Taino people, from ancient migrations to dramatic bottlenecks, and their resilience in the face of those challenges. It's like their story is written in their very DNA.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it also reminds us that genetics is only one part of their story, right?
Absolutely. Their culture, their adaptability, their knowledge of the Caribbean environment, all of those played a crucial role in their survival and success.
We've uncovered so much in this deep dive.
I know, it's fascinating.
We've learned that the Taino likely originated in South America, embarked on this incredible journey to the Caribbean, experienced a genetic bottleneck, and yet still managed to thrive for centuries.
Right.
Their story challenges our assumptions, it deepens our understanding of human migration, and it reminds us that there's always more to learn about the past.
Absolutely. And perhaps the most intriguing takeaway from all of this is that despite disappearing centuries ago, traces of the Taino people still exist,
Right.
not just in archaeological sites, but also within the DNA of living populations.
That's amazing.
Their legacy continues to echo through time, waiting to be discovered and understood.
What a powerful thought.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive, but you've left us with so much to ponder. Thank you for guiding us through this fascinating exploration.
Oh, you're very welcome. I enjoyed it.
And to you listening, we hope this has sparked your curiosity about the Taino people and the incredible stories hidden within our DNA. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.